October 23rd Board of Education meeting. And so glad to have you all here. We will have a public audience if anyone has anything they'd like to say or speak. We'll have it again at the end. And we'll go on to board and administrative communications. Katie?
All right, so at the elementary schools, they had their walk to bike to school day. And historically, they've had really good participation levels at some schools, like up to 70% of kids participate. So it's always a really fun event. At the middle school, 7th graders spent a day at winding trails, participating in team building exercises. And they are celebrating National Unity Day on Wednesday. They are encouraged to wear orange to show their support of bullying prevention and to unite for kindness, acceptance, and inclusion. And every student also wrote a kind message on an orange Post-it to put on someone's locker. And also at the middle school on Thursday, 16 students will accompany the Chinese teacher on a field trip to Hubeline Tower, where they will learn about important Chinese festivals and practice their language skills through poetry recitations. At the high school, we had a pep rally last Friday, and the homecoming dance was on Saturday, and it was a lot of fun for everyone that went and participated. And there's a half day tomorrow for professional development and the emergency preparedness exercise at high school.
Great report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tom?
I'm going to keep this very brief because I know there's some events a little later on this evening. I just want to say that the strategic planning workshop that was held last week was just an amazing experience, and I came away just bowled over by how it was organized and how it was executed, and it just convinced me once again that this system is in very, very good administrative hands in terms of planning, for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yes, briefly, because we do want to get home and watch the Red Sox play. Just on the CREC front, there is nothing going on legislatively. It's a quiet time till after elections. Our concern is who the new education leaders will be once elections take place and who will be on Ed committee. There isn't really much going on at the moment. There's the SPED task force is still going on, and of course the ever-so fingerprinting task force is still continuing, so nothing is moving in that area. But one big area that we are working on within CREC is the Sustainability Working Group, and this is something that we are garnering now to get prepared once the new legislature takes place. And we are preparing a resolution that the CREC Council will vote on next month during our meeting with support of superintendents and hopefully the superintendents within the districts and also the CREC Council members. And the real just for the resolution is just to talk about the funding, how to keep that funding in place as we go forward with the magnet schools. So this is something that over the years we've talked about the fiscal cliff, which is now, and how it's going to be affecting the magnet schools as we go forward, and all our districts that do participate in the magnet schools. So this is something that we're keeping very close eye on. We will be needing support of our 35 districts within CHEC Council, because this is the plea will be more so even harder this year with the state legislature once we get back on the Hill in January. So that's what's going on this front.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Mike?
Well, I think everyone is aware, but in case you're not, I notified the town clerk a few weeks ago that I'll be resigning from the Board of Ed as of the end of November, and I'll have more to say as time goes by. We've got a few more meetings, but I just wanted to let you all know my wife and I are going to be doing some downsizing and relocating, so I have to look after a lot of these things now. It's a good idea. I wanted to leave time for someone who comes into my spot to participate in the budget process, and I didn't want to end up sort of saying halfway through budgeting that now I was leaving, so I thought the timing was good. But anyway, I hope everyone knows that it's been a great honor and a pleasure to serve with all of you as board members and serve alongside the district leadership team and Matt. As I said, I'll have probably some more thoughts to share at my last meeting, but I wanted to let you know.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and it's been outstanding, so thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
big hole in the board.
Could you remind us, please, Mr. Goldman, how many years you have served on this board? 17 years.
17.
Yeah, thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you so much for all of your service, and we will miss you dearly.
Well, thank you very much. And it's been great. It's a lot of time and effort that all of you put in. You know how much it means, and but it's a terrific thing to be able to do, to participate in and kind of help out with the community is something as important as education in the community. So it's been great. Thank you all.
Your counsel will be missed.
Still calling your questions.
Yeah.
That's now on tape. I just wanted to say the leadership team met this week, and they're going to be presenting before us in November, but the work is moving forward, studying schedule opportunities, and a lot of good work's being done, and a lot of research is going into it, and everyone participating in that process has been very invested in it. So it was a good meeting this week, and you'll hear more about it in November.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lemke?
I just wanted to remind the board and our audience at home that on Monday night at 6:30 p.m. in the Henry James Cafeteria, we have overflow in the gym if necessary, but Lynn Lyons, who's a licensed clinical social worker, will be speaking regarding anxiety. And she welcomes any students, middle school age and above, along with parents and guardians and other community members to hear her speak on anxiety. I did have the opportunity to see Ms. Lyons present. I must say she is the best speaker on the topic that I've ever heard, both in person and through articles. So I invite the larger Simsbury community. It is co-sponsored by the Special Education Parent-Teacher Organization, SEPTO, as well as the Community for Care. So again, November 5th, 6:30 p.m. And
Next Monday.
not next Monday, the Monday after, and then the day after, on the 6th, she will be our keynote speaker for our full-day professional development. She'll be the kickoff, realizing that she'll have a preschool through 21 in some cases audience that she will be speaking to regarding this topic from the educator lens that will align and coincide with her remarks the night before to parents and students. So after her keynote, there will be a variety of choice workshops that teachers can participate in. Some topics include executive functioning, trauma, dysregulation, and how you work with students most effectively in the classroom. So we're really looking forward to both opportunities, and certainly after they occur, I'll update the board on how they went.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nothing tonight? Nothing right now.
So I do, just tomorrow is a early release day, and as Katie had talked about, and Neil will talk further about the Simsbury simulation that will take place tomorrow, but the middle school will be looking at departmental work that they'll be doing tomorrow afternoon. At the elementary level, we have an hour of power school training for all teachers in regard to preparing for their report cards, and then different schools are looking at behavioral, executive functioning, data teams, and some raw screen work. So it'll be a full-packed afternoon tomorrow afternoon. And then one other item in your folders is our annual report that comes out every year that really pulls together our strategic planning, our continuous improvement plans. This will be going on the website tomorrow, and copies of this will be distributed to all of our schools available for people, as well as downstairs in the lobby here downstairs. So really take some time, look at it. It's a pretty extensive review of all of the goals that we put forward and the data that supports that, so, thank you.
Just a question about this, please.
Yes.
Historically, has this been the document where we list the colleges and universities that our students have gone to, or is that in some other document?
We have not put it in this document, and it's the profile, it's a folder that comes out for Simsbury High School every
Okay,
year.
thank you.
So that's another, it's on the website, a new one.
That's high
from
school
last-
centric,
That's a
so
high
it
school
probably doesn't
centric
belong in here. Okay,
document.
thank you.
Correct.
That document is designed to accompany every college application that gets sent out at Simsbury High
goes,
School.
yeah.
That's the purpose
So
of
it
that.
answers the questions that colleges are looking for.
Thank you for that insight.
It's really been
Didn't know
updated
that.
nicely over the years,
That's
too.
interesting.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. recommendations for approval of minutes of October 9th. Anyone have any questions, comments?
Move to approve minutes of October 9th.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain.
Opposed? Okay, opposed? Thank you very much. And moving on to the minutes of October 16th, our workshop at the high school. Anyone have any questions, comments?
Read that one.
It was about our strategic planning workshop.
That's this. Okay. Short.
Anyone have thoughts or questions?
That's short.
I'll move adoption.
Thank you very much. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain again.
Thank you very much. Moving on to school nutrition program agreement. Mr. Leclerc.
So the board is used to, I think, the sort of an annual process on one of the state programs, healthy food and beverage certification. This is an unusual event in that, because the state, in concert with the federal school lunch program, National School Lunch Program, has updated their agreement with school districts, and they would like all districts to designate two people. In this case, we would be recommending Matt Curtis and myself to be authorized to sign the document. And we've attached it for you. It's not it's not a change in what our responsibilities are under the National School Lunch Program. So there's a direct link, with the nutritional standards that come down through the federal government and then through the state. So we're not looking to change anything about how the school lunch program runs, but it is required to stay in our program. We get a monthly reimbursement during the school year. We get about $250,000 annually for the nutrition program. It's an important part of that program. So if there's any questions about the very detailed document that was part of your packet, I'm happy to try to answer them. But generally, this is an administrative action that we're looking for the required authorizations.
The fact that it
Anyone?
says permanent single agreement, does that mean we don't have to renew this each year?
So that is the case. This is not an annual thing. So I was not here in the 10 years or so that I've worked for the district. We've never had to do it. This is just an update of this document, and so they're just requiring all, the state and the federal government are saying, we have to have a little bit more updated language in this that outlines the current responsibilities. But it's not any sort of fundamental significant change. It's really an update. It's a housekeeping matter. So once this is authorized, I hope it's another 10 years before we'd have to take any further action.
So I might be confusing it with we must discuss it each budget season but not approve it, or is there something else?
Later on in the calendar year, the state requires an annual healthy food and beverage certification. So that amount of grant money typically is only about $20,000 or so
So
from the
that's
healthy food
separate
and
from
beverage.
this.
Right, and that is
That's
an
my
annual
confusion.
requirement. This is really just one foundational document that does not need to be done
Updated.
on an annual basis.
Okay.
This is a rare event.
Rare update, okay.
Anyone have any other questions?
I'll move it. I'll move to authorize Matt Curtis, Superintendent of Schools, and Burke Leclerc, Business Manager, as the designated representatives to sign the Children Nutrition Program Agreement with the Connecticut State Board of Education and the Simsbury Public Schools in order to effectuate the programs of the National School Lunch Act as amended and the Child Nutrition Act as amended.
Second.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Moving on to the Henry James Memorial School Academic Report.
All right, so I would like to invite Scott Baker, principal, first year at Henry James, as we know that, and Anjanette Belmonte to the table. But before we do that, we have a great recognition that we have tonight. So Rachel, if you would stand up next to your principal and your assistant principal. Rachel Zhang is an 8th grade student right now who in 7th grade designed a new logo. And you can see it right up on the screen for Henry James. It was a whole school opportunity, and Rachel rose to the top. So I'd let either of you make any further comments regarding that participation.
It was such a rigorous process last year. It took us many months from start to finish, and Rachel was the winner of over a couple of dozen students who submitted entries for our new mascot and really had to speak to why the mascot truly represents our HJ way. And the process went from, I think it was around 26 students submitting, team teachers using a rubric to really make sure that they were hitting all of the points, knocking that down to 3 per team, and then having the entire school knock that vote down to 1 student per team, and then having an entire school vote, which not only included students but staff as well. And Rachel clearly emerged as the winner. She was able to draw by hand the lion that you see now as our new mascot. And then we actually worked with Martha Hogan to help design the graphic image for it. And we had Rachel a part of that each and every step so she could see how it was transforming. And she was like, I like it. So she kind of gave it the overall stamp of approval. And we're very happy now to have that as our new mascot.
So Rachel, tell us a little bit about your thinking behind that.
I don't know, like the lion, I see it as one of the main animals in the animal world. So, and our school is really like as a team, and we can work together.
That's great.
That's great.
very sharp.
Congratulations. We are so appreciative. And I walked into the middle school today, and the beautiful new rug, did you get to see the rug at the front door?
No,
Take it.
Not
You've
yet.
got to
Yeah.
take, the rug when you walk into Henry James has this huge emblem.
Medallion on it, nice.
It's so nice.
I went in today as well
you see
and
it?
saw it today. It was
Yeah.
amazing. You did a great job. Really
We
great
are
job.
working with our PTC. We have magnets for everybody.
Oh,
So you can show your
great.
James pride when driving around town or on your file cabinet or somewhere like that. And
Yeah.
we are very happy to still have the home of the HJ way on it. That was started by our assistant superintendent.
I was so glad to see that when I was principal.
The HJ then.
And we did, and we made sure that Rachel received the first magnet of the year, so she absolutely has one to bring home for her car as well.
So congratulations. And your mom must be with you? Congratulations to Rachel. Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful.
All right, Rachel. Thank you
Thank
for
you so
coming.
much.
Thank you. All right. So that's exciting.
That's very exciting.
It's been a long time to have something new like that. So tonight, we have the opportunity to hear from both Scott Baker, principal, and Anjanette Belmonte, assistant principal from Henry James. And this is as a result of their annual report from their continuous improvement plan from last year. Obviously, it's Scott's first year, so it's a reflection on his part back to what was accomplished, but Anjanette was there as well. So tonight, I think you have the clicker. All right. So tonight, we will hear about our mission and vision, the indicators of success that we have around ELA, mathematics. There will not be any science information because there was no science assessment last year. The HJ Way around the school culture, a quick budget preview to give you just some ideas that are being thought about right now at Henry James, and then the areas of focus that they're working on for the 18-19 school year. So Scott and Anjanette are here tonight to share this with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. And just before we begin this annual report, I want to just give a nod and a shout out to Brian White. This is really a reflection on his efforts last year, and some of the big highlights, I think, are getting that renovation approved. He worked really hard on that, and so we will, obviously be benefiting from all of that work that he did. And just personally, I'm sure he's not watching, but I want to thank him for all the work that he did with me over the summer to get me up to speed. We spent quite a few days together, and I couldn't have done it without him. And just hope that the people in Stanford are treating him as well as the Henry James people are treating me. Many thanks to Brian. So this here on the page is something that we just added in the last month or so. This is the hallway that students enter into from the buses at Henry James, and it has connections, challenge, and character in huge letters on the wall, and it's really become, what drives a lot of our work at Henry James. And so just to talk quickly about what these mean to us at Henry James, the connections, this is a time of intense connections with teens. Any of you who have had middle schoolers know that for good and for bad, this is a time of extreme social connection and development. And so a lot of what we do is modeling good connections with each other, with adults. We've built a connections period into the schedule so that students can spend time with adults in a non-academic setting and really develop those relationships. So a lot of what we're doing is creating those connections between students, with families. That's another goal that we're setting, is really those connections with families in our PTC. When we talk about challenge, we're talking about the rigorous academic program that we have at Henry James, and I think I'm uniquely situated to say that the students come to Henry James better prepared than any students in the world. Our elementary schools are top-notch, especially the ones coming from Terrafil. But I've
You're not allowed to say that.
I've had to say it one more time. But I have noticed that the students at the other schools coming in as seventh graders are top level as well. So we want all of our students to be challenged at their own level, though, and we recognize that means something different for every child. And so part of our drive with challenge is to look at the uniqueness of every child and make sure that we're appropriately challenging them with content that's interesting to them, but also at their level as well. The other big challenge that we want students to bridge in these 2 short years is that challenge from really being taken care of so well with their 1 or 2 teachers at the elementary school to having that independence and really take responsibility and self-advocate for themselves as they work their way through middle school and up to high school. And so it's a short amount of time we have to do that work, but that's something that our teachers take very seriously. And then character. We hear a lot about character. I think we're going to hear a lot more about character after that workshop that we did for the vision of the graduate. There's so much in there about students as whole people, and not just the academics, but being a global citizen and being someone who takes action. And so that's something that's also extremely important to us at Henry James School. We talk constantly about the HJ way, and we really view that this character development is as important as their academic development. So this report is a report on our continuous improvement plan. The first part that we're going to go over is the indicators of student achievement. We will take a look at the DRP, which is degrees of reading power. It's been an indicator we've had since I've been here in the district. And then we're going to look at the SBAC sliced a number of different ways. So the first report we have is the degrees of reading power. Just to give a reminder, this test is a test that requires students to persist through a pretty rigorous and long reading passage. It's about 90 minutes where they have to read. So it's a test of reading, but it's also a test of stamina with students. And what this graph really shows is that in grade 3, we had 69% of the kids meeting a district standard. By grade 8, we have 93% of the students meeting a district standard, and that standard increases every year. So it gets harder and harder to pass it. So when you look at this particular measure, we are getting more and more and more students over the line as the years march on. The red line is the average score. So you could see even in sixth to seventh grade, the average score went down a little bit, but the percent of students who passed increased. And I won't bore you with it, but there's a ratio that causes that to drop a little bit. They have to have a confidence interval of a little bit higher in that seventh grade. But we're really pleased with the performance that students have had over time here. And this trend just goes to reflect, I think, as you extend that graph out, even though we don't give the DRP in high school, it extends out to our SAT scores, which are outstanding. I know you saw.
And these
in the
are the
high school
same
report.
kids over that 6-year period of time.
Right, same kids year to year. So this is a cohort growth. This next chart.
Scott, a quick question.
Yes.
Do we have any metric that would compare this performance with other middle schools or not?
This is not publicly available information. It is a standardized test, though. So like these these lines that are drawn in terms of what's a district standard is not something we just pull out of the air. It's a nationally normed standard.
So this was a piece of the previous Connecticut mastery test. So we did have comparisons at that point, but since that's been gone for the last 5 or 6 years, we don't have comparisons.
Thank you.
Right, yep. The next data, we do have comparisons, though. So this is a chart of the ELA SBAC scores going back to 2015. So the bars, this is not cohort growth. You can look from year to year if you want to translate to cohort growth, but I just want to give you some overalls in what we're seeing here. If you look at the grade 7 data, you see just a gradual increase year after year. I think an asterisk on grade 7, when you look at the blue and the green bars, the 16, 17, and 17, 18 years, you can see an uptick there, and that corresponds to us doing some pretty intensive work with Teachers College and reading and writing workshop, as well as aligning to the Common Core state standards. So I think we're seeing the efforts of that instructional work going on in the classroom showing up in the student results. Additionally, if you look at that in grade 8, you see the same thing, but you're seeing it 1 year later because those students have marched through Henry James 1 year later than that. So you see that uptick from 83 to 84% going there. So we're continuing to do work in grade 8 with Readers and Writers Workshop. I'd say it's a more concerted effort in 7th grade right now. And that is something we're looking at because we have to have that bridge to the high school as well. So so there's a little bit of both on that. If you look at cohort growth from 15, 16 to 16, 17, you see it's roughly the same. It differs by about 1% there, going from that year to that year. But the more recent data has us moving up. And the 6th grade to 7th grade, if you look at that, if there was another chart, we had it was 84% in 6th grade, 85% in 7th grade. So a little bit of growth from 6 to 7. When we look at the math performance, if we take a look at grade 7, you can see again the past 3 years we've had steady improvement. And then if you look at the 8th grade, it's up and down, right? And I have some theories on that. Again, I haven't been in the classrooms to see exactly what's going on, but I think part of this improvement in grade 7 that we've seen that's been gradual improvement is that in grade 6, I just happen to know that those grade 6 teachers did pilot, almost all of them piloted the Math in Focus curriculum the year before. And so therefore, these students came to 7th grade last year with a year of Math in Focus under their belts already. And therefore, that might account for the jump that we saw in 7th grade. That's 71% is a pretty good score in terms of when we look at the comparisons to other districts. So I will be really, I'm not a betting man unless the lottery is at $1 billion. But that was, I think, the first lottery ticket we bought as a staff there.
Oh, that's a bad idea. That's a really bad idea.
We didn't win, so it's fine. But when we look at this cohort, 17, 18, 7th graders, I'm expecting big things from them as 8th graders. I think that we are well positioned to have our 8th graders do extremely well. And if we look back to how the 6th graders did, I don't want to steal the elementary report, but the 6th grade in math did quite well also. So I think we've got students coming up with a little bit more experience with Math in Focus, and I'm looking really forward to seeing how students will be doing, in the future.
Do you have a theory about why that grade 8, that significant drop in grade 8?
The 60%?
Yeah, from 72.3 to 60, and not much, had some recovery, but not a lot. What's going on there?
Well,
Those are
it's different cohorts,
different
so
kids.
I don't know if we want to talk about recovery. But that particular cohort of students, even if we look historically back through the elementary school, was one that was a few percentage points below what we typically do anyway. So that's more cohort noise on that grade 8 group there than instructional. So like I'd say, I'd like to see those 8th graders, 17, 18, had very little Math in Focus work prior to coming. So I think the jury's out until we get this next year's group of kids. That'd be my guess.
Tom, if you look at the red 7th grade bar and then the blue 8th grade bar.
So there was a little bit of growth for
That's
those
a
guys.
2% growth for those kids there.
It's not really
It's not
significant.
great, no.
It's not significant.
And likewise, the 65 to the 66. So we do have work, and that is, I think, an area that Scott will continue to talk about in regard to our 8th grade math program.
We've, almost every time we talk about math, we have the same kind of conversation. We've got work to do, and Math in Focus.
Well, but don't forget, we did put.
Could I just finish,
Yeah, we
please?
started that.
Finish, please. Every time we talk about it, there's a lot more work to do. Math in Focus was a tool that was going to be used, and it sounds like it's going to be very, very good, but still, those numbers in grade 8 aren't so good.
No, they're
And
not where we would want them.
what I'm wondering is this, I'll call it a disappointment, a little bit of a disappointment, and put it that way, not crisis, but a little bit of a disappointment. Does the performance in the high school in this area match the performance in the middle school, or is this unique to the middle school? Is the disappointment in middle school a little bigger than a disappointment in high school or not?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
So I do think there's continued work that has to happen at the middle school in regard to our 8th grade program. It is the cohort of kids, as Scott was saying, that we did not have any piloting of Math in Focus, or very little of it
Yep.
the prior year. But this is even, when we talk about grade levels like this, we look at the curriculum, which we've put in Math in Focus, we look at the instruction. So our teachers are requiring a tremendous amount of professional development in that area. And we look at our students that are there as well, and the kinds of supports that they need. We call that the instructional core. And so that gives us an area that we have to continue to focus on. You'll see more as we go through tonight. There's going to be more that will show you that that's an area that we need intervention and focus.
Well, that term, we have a lot of work to do. That's a pretty general term.
Scott's going to talk a little bit more about what we're
I'll
working on.
talk more to that. And I think it's also important to note, Tom, like if you look at the national news, there was just something about the ACTs, seeing a decline in math nationally. So we're not alone in this, and when we get to the district comparatives, we can take a look at that as well, because we are showing some growth there. Like I said, I think the bright spot is looking at the 7th grade and looking at the growth, and there's a pretty significant uptick from last year to this year with the 7th graders. So I think the proof is in the pudding as we move on, but I'm pleased when you talk about an implementation year, when you try a new curriculum, oftentimes you see a backslide. And with the 7th graders, we've seen growth, and with the 8th graders, we saw growth. So
Okay, thank you.
I think we're getting there.
Enough said. Thank you very much.
This is another way to slice the SBAC data, and it's to compare against districts that are similar to us. So this is something we do annually to benchmark where we are. If you take a look at our ELA and literacy results in comparison to our peers, in 2016 and 17, within our DIRG, we were top 5. Last year, we were number 2 by 0.3%, I'll note. And of course, you know me well enough to know to go digging of really where do we stand in the state as well. And we're top 5 in the state. When you look at our 7-8 performance. So I think that is outstanding, and it's something to really build on, for sure. When we look at our math performance in relation to our peers, we're not in the top 5, but just a couple notes. Obviously, we're seeing growth in terms of where we stand in relation to our peers. I think the other important thing to note on these lists is how clustered some of the percentages are, right? So in 16 and 17, we were as far as 18 percentage points off the top. Right now, we're just a hair over 10. So that's showing growth in relation to our peers in terms of how far off we are to the top performing district. And like I said, I think as we are implementing Math in Focus in 8th grade this year, and as we see that cohort that had a really strong performance, I'm expecting that we're going to improve on this metric next year.
Is it possible to break that down by grade?
Yeah, you can break these out by grade. So the 7th grade would be quite a bit higher on this list, and the 8th grade would obviously be a little bit lower.
Yeah.
A little bit lower.
Yeah, if you go back here, you could see, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
this is another way to look at the data, and this is an achievement gap slide that you've seen in the past. And this slide right here is the language arts 7th and 8th grade, and it shows Basically, it takes the average scale score of the students who are not identified as high needs and the average scaled score of the students who are identified as high needs and subtracts them and says, what's the difference between those two groups of kids? And so if you look here, the state average gap is 104, Simsbury's is 98. The highest gap that exists in our DERG is 126, and the lowest is 53. All right, so that's how that works. We're right in the middle of the neighborhood here. And for 8th grade, you can see there's a slightly smaller gap for us, but it's also smaller for the state. And again, this is just another way to look at it. I'll note that this way to look at things, these high needs cohorts are small, so you could have one year where you've got a cohort that widens that gap, or you could have a group of students who do extraordinarily well and because it's averages, pull up that average, and so it's looking at large groups of kids, and there could be a lot of reasons why the data is spread in different ways. I'm going to talk in a minute about another way that we're trying to look at this achievement gap data as a school.
And just to point out, the high needs population that we're talking about is special ed, English language learners, and free and reduced lunch.
Yep. So the math, you can see in grade 7, we have, again, very similar performance in terms of the gap numbers to the English language arts. But in 8th grade, our achievement gap is the highest in our DERG, balanced against the state. There are a number of districts clustered in between the state average and us, but that's something that obviously is concerning, but it's not surprising when you look at the 8th grade math data. So this is great on a surface, but it's not actionable. And so I wanted to just share and you might start snoozing, but share with you how this translates down to the school level and the work that I've been doing with the teachers on achievement gap and on this. And my belief is you don't improve achievement gap by looking at global things about what you're doing in the school. You attack the achievement gap student by student. And you look at that. So a quick example is a math SMART goal that is set. I just copied this from a teacher's goal setting area. And we have a test called the STAR assessment. And without getting too much into it, it gives us projections of how much students should grow based on where they started. So every student has a different growth expectation. And then the same thing is with the SBAC. We've now got growth data, so they give us growth targets for where students should be between their 7th grade SBAC and their 8th grade SBAC. So teachers combed through all that data, and they said, I'm going to make a SMART goal based on the students who have either declined from one year to the other or have not shown the growth that we expect on that STAR assessment. And so they've got these individual goals, and you can see right there, even for kids who exceed, they're not growing the way we want them to. So they're pulling them out and saying, okay, here's my plan for this student, and here's how we want them to grow. And then the students who are below expectation, individual plans with them. And the different people that would help support, and I'll get into the support systems that we have for students in a little bit. But even world language is in on the game. They have identified students who are not doing so well on the listening strand of the SBAC, and they've created their own assessments in Spanish and in Latin and in French to support the listening skills that are tested on the SBAC as well. So that's an example of a world language goal that they're setting. So we're going to be looking macro, probably in future board reports, about students who meet these growth targets rather than the space between scale scores, because I think that tells us a better picture of how students are growing.
That's great. Just another question.
Yep.
That's a wonderful approach, getting right down to the micro level.
Yep.
And
Yep. So I thought
piece by
you should
piece
see
is
that, even though it's really in the weeds. But
just for perspective for the board members and for the public, for that matter, how many high need students are you working with in the Henry James Memorial School?
I don't have the exact number. What? Approximately? There's give you about maybe 120, 150.
Out of and the total school population is
600.
600. So it's between 10 and 20% of the total.
Yeah, well, maybe more like
That's
13, 14%.
Yeah,
But with the special ed,
Need is just around that, it's
Yep.
in a high 12%,
Yep.
but remember, the high needs include special ed,
Right,
EL,
yeah.
and free and reduced
so
lunch.
And
it's-
some of those
But
kids
this program
cross,
is then-
some of
is
those
this-
kids cross, they're
Right.
EL, special
they're
ed,
more
and
than
free
one
and
group.
reduced lunch.
Yeah.
See,
One kid.
this individual, working at the granular level, which is a fabulous strategy, but there's a lot of them.
There are.
And so it will become, and has become, I'm sure, a more work-intensive program. And I'm thinking forward to the budget. And I'm trying to frame some ideas about what sort of, I love doing this. If you could maybe wave a magic wand and get money, what would you do with it? And I'm thinking about this particular program in the Henry James. You're working on that?
I'm just
Okay.
laughing because that was one of Matt Curtis's interview questions for him. If you could wave a magic wand and money was no object, what would you do at your school?
So just to follow that thought a little bit further, and maybe to plant a seed, I mean, you might want to think about as you
Yep.
put together your budget ideas before we have a look at them I mean, this is such an important issue, and it's a big strategic issue, and it's a big priority for our district. We talk about it every year, more than once. And I'm just wondering if we should start thinking about what could.
That's further in the report. There is,
Gonna get there.
we're getting to the line item
Yeah,
budget,
okay.
so we've got that coming.
Yeah, okay.
I think one of the
Sorry.
biggest pieces that this has brought out, that Scott pointed out, is the fact that you're looking at exceeds kids. In the past, you might have looked at kids that meet and exceed and say they're fine, we'll move them forward. But we're seeing now that every student has a amount of growth that they have to achieve over the course of the year. So teachers are now looking, not that they didn't, but in a much more discrete way of looking at how students are performing at every level.
Individually.
And putting plans in place like this to address it.
And I'll also say that with the students who are below or really far below, they might not in 1 year meet the target. And we've always celebrated like meeting that goal target, right? And instead, there's a target set for them. That they would get there within 2 to 3 years to that mark. So we can celebrate when they make the growth
Sure.
that is set for them at the start of the year. It helps the students see their success, so we share those scores with students. But it also gives a lot of satisfaction to the teacher as well. Ooh, they met their target, we can share that with parents, so.
The parents,
Yeah, so I think it's a better approach than just saying, how many kids did we get to goal?
Right.
Right?
I was just taking this a little bit further, and this would be a question for Aaron. This is a really interesting strategic approach to dealing with and if it's a good idea for the middle school, is it also a good idea in the elementary schools?
We are
and in
doing
high
it at
schools?
the
So
elementary level.
we were setting these targets. This is where it came from.
So he showed me this with a high school lens, because I was talking to him about the challenge of the way teachers set goals when you have 100 kids as a secondary teacher versus when you have 25 kids. Because when you're an elementary teacher, you know your 25 kids inside and out, and you set goals like this. And Scott said, let me show you how we're setting our goals, and I almost fell out of my chair, because the high school has never set goals quite like this. This is pretty unique to the secondary level to be setting goals targeted to specific students just like that.
So this year, what we've done is we've expanded the STAR program into 9th and 10th grade. So it's happening in 9th grade and 10th grade for mathematics and 9th grade for ELA. And those kids have had the STAR for the last 4 years, 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
So we have longitudinal data of those kids. So this is, and that's a lot of this work tomorrow afternoon that teachers will be doing, is also going to be looking at this data even more deeply.
Thank you.
So,
So next, we're going to take a look at the teaching and learning supports that are in place for the teachers and students. The first three that I want to talk about are really supports for the teachers in terms of aligning curriculum to the Common Core state standards and to the NGSS. So we're in year 2 of Math in Focus. Teachers are extremely positive of this. When I've done a listening tour for the past month or so of just tell me how things are going at Henry James, and from the math teachers I hear over and over again how enthusiastic they are for Math in Focus. I hear anecdotal things like, man, I took a look at that unit and said the kids are never going to be able to do this. And then they do it. And like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. And so they're really open to it, and they're excited about it, and they're really enthused about how the pedagogy of the program and the content of the program is pushing students to new levels for all of them. So that's really exciting. We have a new math department supervisor who is 100% on board and is doing great work with the math teachers. We also are implementing the next generation science standards, and we are writing a lot of new curriculum, but again, this is also different pedagogy, different teaching practices that the science teachers are having to get used to, and Greg Kerr is really helping us along the way with that, with unit design and writing of curriculum. And then in language arts, we are well underway with the TC, the Columbia Teachers College units. We're making that transition, or we've made that transition in 7th grade, and thinking about what elements do we want to bring up to 8th grade. Our department supervisor, Bill Antonitis, was down at Columbia this summer for a week-long workshop, learning the ins and outs of Teachers College at the middle school. So we're excited about that work, and it certainly is showing up in the data. And then in terms of supports for students, we have our academic supports center, where students get literacy, math, and organizational supports. They enter based on teacher recommendation, our hands-up process, our sit process, and that is a whole team, and I'm going to talk more about that when I get into our budget discussion. But then also our sit team. We meet weekly. We just met a couple hours ago to discuss students. The psychologist, the social worker, Anjanette and I, and guidance are there. Our Dean of Students is also there to discuss students in special ed, to discuss students of concern and how are we doing with them, and keeping tabs on how they're doing. Title I, we are a Title I school this year, but will not be next year. So this is a little foreshadowing to my budget requests. But
what is that?
We have
So that goes on the percentage of free and reduced lunch students that you have in your building, and the middle school has dropped below the criteria.
Okay, thank you.
So they have this year left of spending money. Latimer was picked up this year as a Title I school. You'll hear that in the elementary report. Terriffill has been
always been a Title I
long-standing
school.
and will continue to be because of that. So it's a good amount of money that the middle school's going to.
Yes, so the Title I has allowed us to do both math coaching and math intervention. And so we have two positions there that or one position there that really helps do both of those things. We have a retired teacher who, from Farmington, who's come over to fill that role. So more on that when we get to budget preview. And then the co-teaching in English language arts and math, and I know Sue can attest to this, that this program is in year 4. The data shows that students, our special education students who are in co-taught classes, do better, right?
Yes.
The model works. Teachers are very positive about it, both the regular education and the special education teachers. And I think we just need to keep thinking creatively about how we can continue the co-teaching and even maybe expand into other classes because it's working.
I'll be sharing some of that data next month when I do our program review for special ed.
Yeah, it's really compelling data. Okay, so next we are going to take a look at the school culture. And before we get started with that, I just want to publicly thank Mrs. Belmonte. She's really helped ease my transition. I would be in huge trouble without her right now. And she knows our school inside and out, has been instrumental in building a positive school culture at our school. So she's going to walk us through some of the efforts to build a positive school climate.
Great, thank you. All right. So we'll start off with some of the climate survey themes. We did administer a survey to not only the parents, but the students, as well as the staff this past spring in both grades 7 and 8. And when we sort of sorted through the data and looked at it, we categorized it into areas of strength and also areas that we want to see continued growth. So it really makes me happy to report that our students and staff are absolutely feeling safe every day that they walk into Henry James. That's a wonderful feeling. It's great to know from not only the parent lens, but the teacher lens, and of course the staff lens, that really our faculty does maintain high academic standards. I mean, that's what sets us apart, and we're proud to know that that's the feedback that we have received. And to just know that there is a sense of welcoming to students of all backgrounds, and that we really have a great focus on diversity and representing and respecting all of the multi-cultures that are present within our building. Some areas for growth are a sense of connectedness, and as Mr. Baker pointed out, we are in year 2 of our new schedule, which highlights a connections period, and it is just such a great time for the staff to work with a small group of students and to just make that team concept feel even a little bit smaller. There's roughly anywhere from 14 to 16 students, and they do just become this small, tight-knit family, and they start off with these wonderful connections, and as the year starts to progress, you start to see those connections groups sort of branch out into interest groups, where you have teachers who have maybe some expertise or passions, and they invite students to join them to just maybe do some painting. That might be a focus group for some kids, or just doing different types of artwork, or a reading group, and it really just allows that continued relationship to build amongst the staff and the students. So it's really wonderful, and you see different friendships start to bloom and blossom over the course of the year because students spend some more time together and learn about one another in just different capacities. So we'll continue to focus on the connections piece. The student-to-student respect, we are working as a climate committee and as a school to continue the development of our character education lessons, which really mirror the HJ way. And in addition to that, we've done a lot of work with our staff around restorative practices, so it's how we are working with our students to promote respect, and when those little blips and bumps occur during the school day, that we make sure that we're listening to our students and that we're helping them to know that they are heard, and that we bring our students together, we do conflict resolution with them. And I've sat in with many of our teachers, and we've done those sort of circles with our kids to really let them know we're here to support them, and that we have to respect each other and kind of walk away with some agreed upons, so that those behaviors start to diminish over time, if not completely go away. And in addition to those 2 top areas for growth, our school counselors do a lot of work with our students, whether that's just in some activities around mindfulness, whether that's in meeting with the students one-on-one or in small groups to foster the social emotional learning that takes place. They're also a tremendous resource to our students around respect and making connections. And then the professional development is something we want to continue to look at. Teachers are just wanting to learn so much more and take everything in to build their capacity. And really, they love the concept of having some choice in that. So are they able to bring ideas to the table that get approved, or are we as a district able to offer choice to our teachers so that they feel that their needs are being met? And I think even most importantly, what they're sharing with us is that they learn best from one another. So the concept of teachers teaching teachers, they gain so much from one another, and we'd love to see those opportunities present themselves more and more. Around school culture, I'm so happy that at the end of the year that CAS did recognize us as a school with just amazing positive school climate status, and we've been designated that for a period of 3 years. We did have a committee come through this past spring, and they actually met with members of our staff, they met with our students, they met with parents, and really just kind of probed around all of the things that we're doing. We produced a lot of documentation for them and examples of the work that we've done as a school, and we are proud, and we do have this beautiful banner hanging right in our main hallway as you come into the school for all to see. So that just felt like after a wonderful year to have that recognition.
Are the other schools in the district eligible for that award or not?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just a middle school.
No, it's not.
CAS is the Connecticut Association of Schools.
So the climate committee is my favorite committee in the school. I'm a little biased. I love the work that the teachers bring to the table, the ideas that they have. There are about 15 staff members who just come up with great events for teachers. They come up with great events for our students. You know, they had thought about changing the new mascot after all of these years and trying to reinvigorate on the HJ way. They love to start book clubs with the staff around different topics. They're just so engaging. They think about different assemblies for our students, and whether that means bringing in guest speakers or that means having in-school assemblies in which we and the students and the staff lead. So they're a hardworking group. They also are the ones who are behind the character education lessons that are being developed. So we just have a wonderfully committed group of teachers who are all about fostering this positive environment. Other ways with the school culture is just the partnership that we have with the PTC, and just to see how much they support the work that our students do, the activities that our students get to engage in, as well as support our teachers with any needs that they might have. So that's something I look forward to seeing continue to develop. Our HJMS beautification, I'll show you a couple of examples in a few minutes, but if you haven't been to HJMS in a little while, we do invite you to come in. I took Erin on a tour, I took Sue on a tour. It's just coming alive, and it's looking more and more like, I would say, a modern-day middle school. And you just see the Henry James pride all throughout the building. And it's exciting because for someone who's been there for 12 years, to see the transformation is great. But the 7th graders come in and they're like, wow, this is wonderful, it's awesome. But they haven't seen it sort of grow over time. So those of us that have been around really understand it a little bit more. But you'll see quotes throughout the school on the walls. You'll see the new rugs that we have. The gymnasium really just highlights the HJ way, so that wherever you are, there's banners in the stairwells. You're just hit in the face with all of the positivity and who we are. It's been fantastic. And then from the student lens, we have our student council that meets a couple of times per month, and they are just completely involved with ways to continue to promote kindness, ways in which we support our community locally, statewide, or even globally. Last year we participated in CCMC's Pajama Day. We raised almost $700 for children who are sick. They plan the dances. They're involved in the turkey trot. Just great ways to keep us engaged in what makes society a great society. And last year, Mr. White did form a principals advisory group in which he met with students from each team once a month, and they just talked about different topics, everything from homework to connections to your new schedule to what is it like to be a 7th or an 8th grader at Henry James, and their feedback was invaluable, and it helps drive a lot of the work that we're doing this year. So really happy to say we offer just an enormous amount of extracurricular opportunities for our students, and we have just about 70% participation rate at Henry James. We have opportunities for every student. There are so many faculty members who oversee these clubs and activities. They facilitate. What I love about Henry James is that you can come see Mr. Baker or myself at any time and say, here's a club or an activity I'd like to propose. Another one just came in today. So I have another club that I'd like to propose, and if I can get a teacher to facilitate, is this something that we can do? And we're always like, yes, we talk to the kids, we let them know we're hearing them. And an example at the beginning of this year was actually Mr. Rick Collins, one of our English teachers. He proposed doing a Lions lap, and at 7:15 in the morning, he comes just sort of positively marching through the cafeteria and out onto the blacktop, and he's like, the Lions lap is on, who's with me? And you just see swarms of kids get up out of their seats or off the blacktop. They follow him out the health wing to the tennis court area, and the kids just are running laps. They drop their books along the fence line, they go out, they get this burst of energy, they come back in, and they're just ready to learn, and he's there high-fiving the kids, and period 1 starts, and they're just invigorated. So something like that is just what makes us a great place to be. It's a
Is that
great
a
example.
relatively new teacher, or is that a veteran
No,
teacher?
Mr. Collins is a veteran teacher. Yeah, veteran teacher. And again, I just think we have multiple opportunities for leadership experience for our kids, whether that's student council, or it's, again, the principals advisory group, and our student leadership team through school counseling department. So just a multitude of offerings. So these are some examples of what you will see if you come through the halls at Henry James. The time is always right to do what is right is sort of our core quote that guides everything that we do at Henry James. Mr. Baker is always reflecting and referencing that quote by Martin Luther King Jr., and kids see it in the main hallway every time they pass it. We do, I feel we do such a great job at really recognizing different cultures throughout our school year, and Hispanic Heritage Month is just one example of that. And not only is there just this beautiful poster on the wall that kids can see and reference, but Mr. Baker includes for his character quotes, famous quotes that these individuals have made. And we do lessons with our kids and connections to also celebrate it. So they're learning about it in multiple modes. Here's our gymnasium. So on one wall, you see Henry James, home of the HJ Way. And then on the opposite wall, I said, well, for anyone who comes in and doesn't know what the HJ Way is, well, you have your word splash up there now to constantly remind the kids. So the building is just beautifully coming to life.
Great, thank
Are
you.
those new visuals, or have they been there for a while?
All new.
That's all brand
All
new.
new this year.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been exciting.
So I thought I'd just give a little update. And
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
And I guess, Aaron, is probably most directed to you. The one opportunity in the survey was, well, the one that jumped out to me was sort of around respect. And we saw the same thing in the high school one as well. I just didn't know, are there similar questions? I'm just trying to see if there's any parallels there. Are they asking similar questions?
they
Is there
are.
any synergies we can take from that?
And I think that's one of the areas of focus that we're really trying to work on, and I think our November 6th is really, how do we engage our students in positive activities that they can continue to build that respect, between each other, one another along the way. But for the adults have to understand it best in order to then
Sure.
engage the
Yeah.
students in it. So it's been a year, it will be a year of focus that starts on November. We'll follow it up in March again and then you can see some of our elementary on their PD building days are doing continued work around that kind of.
And I think it's also worth noting that this time period in their lives is one
Oh,
where
absolutely.
there's
No,
a lot of
there's no
perceived
judgment there. I just
Yeah.
kinda jumped out at me that-
I'd love
that
to
was
see like
both,
what
yeah.
normal, what's the national trends on those responses, right?
That would be.
So it's definitely a relative weakness, though. So it's what we want to work on, right? For sure.
And
So
just one other question
Yep.
on the culture thing, and that was an inspirational presentation. It was so good to hear all these things that are going on over there. I wish the high school I went to, the schools I went to were like that. They certainly were not, believe me. But I'm just wondering if we have ever measured the students' perception of, interest of, attitude toward, understanding of the H.J. Henry James Way. Have we actually researched that?
Yes, and last year, the survey absolutely asked questions around that. How much do you feel you learn about it? How often do your teachers reference it? How well do you feel you understand it? So, the climate committee last year definitely used some questions that we've seen before in our panorama surveys, but we also added a multitude of questions to get at information that we thought was important as a school. And the HJ Way, there's probably 3 or 4 questions. And kids said that they know it, they understand it, they feel it is present, but there's certainly more that we can do with it. And I think the development of those character ed lessons are just those ways that we can continue
Yeah.
to reinforce the
Yeah.
messaging.
So it's getting through to us, but it's really getting through to the people it needs to get through to.
Yeah,
That's
you
good.
can't go anywhere
Can't go
without
anywhere.
seeing it.
That's
They know it.
encouraging. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So just a little update in terms of my first month and a half, some things that, I've tried to be doing. Last year, our school theme was Show You're Awesome, and it was all about showing, how all of your individual strengths and all that. And what I wanted to show the students, 2 things, is number one, like the power of words, is to just subtract one letter, how it changes the message. So this year, instead of Show You're Awesome, it's Show Our Awesome. And I launched it with the teachers, with a little word splash, with everybody's name in the word our. And you can see each team has made a bulletin board, and all their kids' names are in the bulletin boards. And it's really my message to them was, how can we help each other shine, and how can we help each other succeed, and not and like so. The year before is really focused on the individual, and this year is really focused on the collective in terms of our school community and how can we all grow together. We've also been focusing on the little things. Part of my launch was stealing a little bit from the graduation speech to look up, because I noticed the kids were coming in from their cars and from the buses, just looking down at their phones and walking to their class. So we've made a concerted effort. I've talked to the kids, like, we're going to say good morning to each other. We're going to look each other in the eyes. The staff all knows that, to be out in the hallways greeting and saying good morning and saying goodbye and have a good night. And I know it's working because I had a night with my daughter, Anna. It was last week where I was up until 1:30 helping with the biology test. I was exhausted in the morning, and I wasn't saying good morning. And kids started saying, good morning, Mr. Baker, before I said good morning to them. And I said, oh, it's working. Like, I know it's working. Because they were calling me out on saying good morning first, which was awesome to see, out on the blacktop. So those are just a few of the little things that we're we're working on as the new principal.
As someone who drops off a seventh grader many days, it's actually great to see you out there. It really is.
It's much better than a cup of coffee. They have more energy than caffeine. It goes both ways, and that's my message to them, is that, yes, it's great for us to be staying warm, but it energizes us too. And if they do it to each other, it energizes them. And teachers have reported that there's definitely a more positive vibe at the start of the day. So we're working on that, and we'll continue to. Quick budget preview. Obviously, the big one is the Phase 3 renovation. That's my desk a couple days ago with all these blueprints of the auditorium and the science wing and the library media center. There's meetings just about daily, right, Burke? And so right now we are in full swing with the planning of this, talking to teachers and getting their input. And really, it's a community effort right now in terms of all of the planning that's going on. So that's extremely exciting. Everyone's really excited about it at the building. Professional learning opportunities is one that came up in our surveys, and after talking to teachers, they're both interested in learning from each other, but also there's value in going out and learning at a national conference. I was able to get some teachers to the national math conference that happened to be in Hartford this year. It's all over, but it happened to be in Hartford this year. So, and they were so excited to go out and learn something and then bring it back to the department. So that's something I'd like to budget for, to be able to get, especially like science teachers, out to some of the thinking with the next generation science standards, and then for them to come back and share with their department. The math tutor is on there because, like I said, we're losing our Title I support, but we still have kids who need support with math. So just because a percentage changes doesn't mean our need changes. So I would like to put in our budget for additional math support to match what we currently have. Next year, we are moving to one-to-one Chromebooks, and these aren't, the budget item here is not to purchase Chromebooks, but it's for the support. Because there's a few things that happen when you go one-to-one with Chromebooks, and lessons learned from the high school, is number one, teachers just depend on it for instruction. So if a student has a broken Chromebook, it needs to be repaired immediately, or repaired and then replaced. And that takes at least like a full-time technician at the school to be able to help manage that, the hardware side of things. Right. We have the Chromebooks, so it's not a matter of us buying the Chromebooks because of the way that the high school is doing their one-to-one initiative. We will have Chromebooks for the students at Henry James, but it's more the human resource side of things. And then lastly, a request in for a 1.0 wellness teacher. Wellness, you've probably heard in the high school presentation, is the new word for PE and health being taught together. And right now, our students get PE about 3 times a week, PE and health, a combination of that 3 times a week. And I don't think that's enough at the stage that they're at. This is the time in life where students are setting down their physical fitness habits. They're experimenting, if they're going to, with bad stuff. So this is the time when they need the daily instruction in health and wellness. And if we were able to add a 1.0 wellness position, we could get there. So that's something we'll include in our budget with a more detailed, obviously, request. But I really think that this is the point in life. If kids had health and PE every day at any point, it should be this point. So that's a preview of our budget. Areas of focus, year 2 of math and
Excuse me, just a question about the budget. Just to follow up, I mean, there was a lighthearted comment that's an interview question that Matt Curtis asked, if you could wave a magic wand, get some money, what would you do with it? What was your answer?
What was my answer?
If you remember, or
it was
make
12
one
years
up.
ago. I honestly think
how would you answer it today? You know?
How I answered it before, I remember, is getting a laptop for every student. And so look at that's happening next year, which is remarkable.
What about today? What if you
but I think is having the social, learning what I've learned as a principal over the years is having the right social and psychological supports in for students. And coming to Henry James, I have been blown away at the work our counselors do with students, and our psychologist and our social worker, that there's just this whole wing of the school that looks after students and meets with teachers and can meet with kids. It was one thing as the principal for me to try to do some of that, but I'm also the disciplinarian at the school. So for the students to have that level of support, if we didn't have that, that would be number 1 on my list. But we do have it. We have a great,
Well, if you were appearing before the Board of Finance, for example,
Yeah.
and they saw a line item about that particular function in your school, and they said, what's this? Why is this so important? Why do you have this in your budget? Why are you spending this money? Well, how would you answer that question? And I'm asking that question
Yeah.
for future reference.
So, I mean, I'd answer that in that our students are at an age right now where they start to pull away from their parents a little bit, right? The connection with their teachers isn't as strong as it was in elementary school. And so they need someone in their corner. And they need someone to be advocating for them, providing that bridge between teacher and parent sometimes. For more at-risk kids where the family is having trouble, a lot of times when the students get to this age, it's big-time trouble. And so these people have the expertise, they have the training to be able to get the resources for the family and for the students. Without that, there's not much you can do for, like, a teacher of math can teach math. She has 120 kids. So she can't provide that support. And so one psychologist certainly can't do that. So that.
Thank you.
That's why we need it.
I guess I'm getting the sense that if it
Hopefully the
weren't,
counselors
if
are
it
watching.
weren't there, they wouldn't be learning as well as they are, I guess, is what.
No, and I think when you get to those individual goals, if we come back to that, like the future work on that, is those students who have those growth goals, that's not just instruction.
Correct.
That's family support. So getting to the point where counselors have those kids as their improvement goals as well is the place where I want to get.
Thank you.
But that's going to take time.
Thank you.
So areas of focus for next year, or for this year, is year 2 of Math in Focus. We're obviously well on our way with supporting there. The implementation of the next generation science standards is really important. We're going to have release time for science teachers to be writing units and professional development for them. Those are the 2 big curricular pieces. When we look at our school-wide focus, we're in year 2 of looking at inquiry as kind of a school-wide umbrella of getting student-centered learning in all of the content areas and getting kids asking good questions and figuring out how to ask the right questions, and in some instances doing research that is really student-driven rather than the research projects we had when we went to school where you have to do like Gettysburg and give a blow-by-blow of how it went down. So also our school connectedness goal is very important and on the front minds of teachers with our connections period. And then, of course, preparing for the Phase 3 renovation, which is not just like meetings and building, but as we move in the months, it's going to be changing teachers' classrooms, and it's going to be stressful, and so we're going to have to support teachers in that as well. And then continued focus is looking at the achievement gap, but moving more toward looking at that growth of individual students. Tiered academic supports in reading and math to continue to look at our co-teaching model and continue to support that. But we're in year 4, so looking at, how can we even do it better? And then lastly, keeping up our peer visitations and instructional rounds as a tool for us to continue to improve. One of my focuses was, connections is how I started. And at open house this year, one of the things I talked to the parents about, I have a high schooler and a middle schooler, and I get about, how was today? Fine. Did you do anything? No, not really. Did you have any fun? No. So I took my camera, and Anjanette helped me out a little bit. And for the 7th graders and the 8th graders, we did a little day in the life. So we took a bunch of pictures. So I wanted to show you what we showed the parents so that you could get a glimpse of what life is like at Henry James.
And causes of success. May you have the confidence to always do your best. May you take no effort in your being generous, sharing what you can, nothing more, nothing less. May you know the meaning of the word happiness. May you always lead from the beating in your chest. May you be treated like an esteemed guest. May you get to rest, may you catch your breath. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Whoa. May the road less paved be the road that you follow. Whoa. Well, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money. without you. I want you to have it all. 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 May you be as fascinating as a slap bracelet. May you keep the chaos and the clutter off your desk. May you have unquestionable health and less stress. Having no possessions, though immeasurable wealth. May you get a gold star on your next test. May your educated guesses always be correct. And may you win prizes shining like diamonds. May you really own it each moment to the next. And may the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Whoa. Or may the road less paved be the road that you follow. Whoa. Well, here's to the hearts that you gonna break. Here's to the lives that you gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we gonna have. You don't need money, you got free pass. Here's to the fact that I'd be sad without you. I want you to have it all. 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 Oh, I want you to have it all. All you can imagine. Oh, no matter what your path is, if you believe it, then anything can happen. Go, 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 raise your glasses. Go, 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 you can have it. Oh, I told you, here's to the hearts that you gon' break. Here's to the lives that you gon' change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we gonna have. You don't need money, you got free pass. Here's to the fact that I'd be sad without you. I want you to have it all. 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 I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we gonna have. Here's to you always making me laugh. Here's to the fact that I'd be sad without you. I want you to have it all.
A lot of smiles in that film, lots
great.
of smiles. That was great. You took all those pictures?
We did.
You did?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Put it together.
That was nice.
Anyone have any questions for our, that was a very detailed and very helpful look at your school. It's a great place. Thank you for running it. We appreciate all your hard work. It's a unique place, with just 7th and 8th grade, and you guys do a really great job. We were happy to know that. Anyone have any questions?
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Moving on to our capital improvement plan. I think
Okay.
that's my friend Burke.
Yes, just going to have a quick update. Last month, the board saw just the roll forward draft of what things had already been on the plan for the out years, and we had a presentation on some of the athletic items from Jeff Penny. So the two topics that we said that we wanted to talk about a bit further, the district security and the climate control. District security is a bit of a segue for Neil and for our next topic, but we were pleased to receive the $850,000 from last year's capital monies. We've been busy. Steve Twitchell and Neil Sullivan and I have been meeting regularly and working steadily on various items, and so there's certainly not going to be a shortage of items to address with that $850,000. The biggest question marks now in trying to figure out where our budget's going to be is that we're trying to have the main offices and vestibules be similar to how we've renovated at Henry James and Squadron Line with those most recent main office projects where your visitors after hours have to go through the school office. And so we have an architect that's helped us to try to break down 4 different schools where that needs to be done, And now our next step is we're expecting cost estimates. So once we know that, we'll have a better sense. But as a concept, the only thing new on this plan tonight that's in bold is really trying to get the concept of, we think there's going to be a more regular need for infrastructure improvements around schools' security. So as a placeholder, we are suggesting in this first administrative draft, $500,000 in year 1 and year 3 for further school security efforts. We don't have the backup. It's really just trying to get that concept out there, and sort of looking to what we've done with this district network infrastructure concept, where we've gotten used to doing that on a sort of regular every other year basis. So I'll kind of not go into details and let Neil's presentation be the place where you can ask more about that if you have questions. The second topic that I wanted to highlight was climate control. So the board recalls that we've had two allotments of capital dollars. Previously, we have made very good progress at all of our K-6 schools, and we've not been able to make as much progress at Henry James and the high school, just due to both the cost and the sheer size of those schools. So our plan now is with Steve Twitchell and I have reviewed. We have a second half to go of our 5 K-6 schools, but we feel with the existing capital dollars, we should be able to get all of our classrooms done. So we're not trying to do gym spaces or cafeteria spaces, but to get those classrooms done. And we're going to engage with the engineer that we used for the high school for the cafeteria that was done this past spring and the gold gym, and try to get something out to bid early this coming year. Where we do have more work to improve on is at Henry James and the high school. So Henry James, just wanted to highlight that in our Phase 3 project, which I expect at one of your next meetings, we're going to be able to talk about more the design and scope of that. I just wanted to highlight that we had always planned to have air conditioning in the new spaces, which would be the auditorium and library media center. We never had in that budget to do air conditioning within the rest of the building. So we've certainly thought about that. We've worked with the engineer that we're going to use for the elementary work, had done the work at the high school, like I said, and is also doing work at Henry James. He designed the gymnasium AC that was done in Phase 2. And he has looked at it, and it's really not like we're missing any groundwork in this phase. We can do classroom by classroom cooling, and it's not going to be like we have to undo something that we're doing in this phase. So I think it is something that we would like to have the updates to his prior estimates, but we were looking in 2016, his estimate was just to do the second floor of Henry James was close to $1 million. So that's giving you a sense of that magnitude. Regarding the high school, the third floor alone was about $3.5 million to do AC. So that is something that I think we need to revisit. What other options we might have there. Something that Andy O'Brien and I have talked about. Trying to come up with something to make more feasible progress there. So we just wanted to highlight tonight that that's the work that we know we have to move forward on, but we're also trying to figure out how best to make progress in the remaining buildings.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you.
Little
very much.
sticker shock there.
It's been that way, and those are not brand new numbers.
No.
Recent, but not brand new.
Mr. Sullivan, I think we can move on to our safety update.
Okay, so the board will recall that I did a lengthy presentation with Jeremy Cormier in the spring regarding school safety. The plan after that was to, a couple times a year, probably once in the fall, once in the spring, give you a much more quick update just to show you where we are with our school update work. So I have 5 slides to show you that hit on the various aspects of what we are doing on the umbrellas of school safety. And the first dovetails with what Burke was just talking about is that how do you spend $850,000 of capital improvement for security? Well, this is how. And it's an upgrade to our fob system in every school except the 6 schools, except for the high school, which had an updated
People
system.
carrying
A fob is the thing that you don't.
Entry.
You don't enter into a building with a key anymore. You enter into a building with a fob that scans into, and that way, if somebody loses a fob, you simply shut off their fob, and you don't have the whole issue of like rekeying. So it's an electronic entry system that would allow a teacher to leave the school and fob themselves back in, but nobody else, a student or a visitor, for instance. So it is, our fob system that existed is extremely outdated and needed to be updated. And it was an expensive item to update that in 6 schools, all of the schools except for the high school. And that work is 95% complete, started this summer and has carried into the fall. The other work that has been ongoing is window enhancements. This really mostly involves a product that goes onto first floor windows that makes intrusion through a window much more difficult. It doesn't make it impossible, but if anybody tried to intrude through a window, that window would not break easily. I can show you video of us testing this, kind of whacking windows with a sledgehammer, and you're not getting in. And that it's a product that we've placed on the windows. It used to be on some areas, and we've really covered first floor with that. The work that Burke has talked about is the vestibule work. We're trying to create that double entry in so that you'll come through the first door of the school before you can enter the main office of the school. You call it a person lock. You've probably been in other facilities where when you come through that first door, you have to identify before you can get through a second door. And that's where we're designed that way with our new projects, but we weren't designed that way with the other schools. So we're, with this architect Al Jakunski, looking at those designs in each of the other schools to make that notion of a person trap before they can be allowed into the school a reality. A lot of work with camera additions in areas that our cameras were not showing, and improvements. Quite frankly, since we started with the cameras at the high school, the resolution on these things are much better, so it's just replacing some older cameras to get better surveillance. And the other idea, combined with the vestibules, is the notion of a few well-placed bollards or planters when you look to see around that many schools, if you start to look around, and lots of public places are using a bollard system to prevent a vehicle that might enter a school. So that's why we're spending that money, and we have even more needs. And that's why we're looking for that placeholder related to capital improvement. In the spring, I gave you a extensive set of recommendations that came from our security consultant that came, Don Chalmette. You'll remember he's a retired school resource officer from the Virginia area. At that time, we had him analyze Simsbury High School and Squadron Line in that second bullet, and he had delivered reports to those schools. Those schools are continuing to follow up on his recommendations. We very late in the school year, were able to get him to assess Henry James and Latimer Lane. I wish his reports had arrived at a convenient time. They arrived right as school opened. Mm-hmm. So it was just a very hard time for those school safety committees and principals to dive into reports as you're opening school. So they are really just digesting those reports and starting their process of an action plan. But I am pleased that we will finish this off. And on November 14th, 15th, and 16th, Don will be back to do Central, Tooten Hills, and Terriffill. So all 7 schools will have gotten Don's look at their safety and security protocols over the course of 2 years. As much as the first slide is about hardening your building and physical enhancements to keep it safe, what I like about our balance here is Don is all about school culture and teamwork and relationships and awareness of your environment to make a school safer. And I think it's a really nice balance that we've been able to create. Also, we have engaged with a nonprofit, the Sandy Hook Promise organization. Obviously, this is a group of parents that from the tragedy in Newtown who formed a nonprofit. And what we discovered through a visit that Sue and Ann Jeanette Belmonte and I made down to Newtown this summer to their offices is that what they had become about is programs and training for schools to educate about nonviolence and about how to make people feel welcome and to attack issues of students who may feel socially isolated, all free of charge. And so that's where we're looking at 3 of their programs. Start with Hello, which is really targeted at younger students to erase any feelings of social isolation through a week-long notion of starting with hello, of making sure your environment is welcoming. For secondary schools, Henry James and Simsbury High School, we're looking at a program called Say Something, which is, as Scott Baker was talking about, it's where students may start to pull away from their parents and adults in terms of talking about issues. And it's not only issues of being worried about somebody who might do something violent or hurt somebody at a school, but also kids who might do self-harm. And if you're aware of somebody in your school, it's your obligation, especially in the area of social media where adults are not going to be seeing that, to say something. And there are actually anonymous reporting opportunities to be able to say something, and it's really a program that we were excited about. And right now, we've introduced all of these to the principals and in our planning stages. And then, so programs for students, but what we also discovered on our visit that I don't think we knew much about is that there's programs for professional staff. So there's a program around safety assessment and intervention, kind of risk assessments. So this would be training for mental health professionals in your school district, additional training to recognize the signs of when a student might need some assistance.
So Neil, on that, there's also on the topic of professional development, I took part in a webinar recently on the K website, Ethan's Song Story and the Journey to Sandy Hook Promise, and this goes along the line of those that you met and talking about that. So for board members, it's available if you get on the website, on the K website. It's about an hour-long webinar, and we participated with the Sandy Hook Promise collaborators on that. So it was really worthwhile.
Of course, we've mentioned the major emergency simulation that's going to happen tomorrow. I gave the board some word about it a couple of weeks ago, and it is going to be a pretty major event at Simsbury High School tomorrow afternoon. After we clear students from the campus, there are going to be about 40-plus first responders in a training exercise that involves fire, police, ambulance services, our school personnel administration, the town manager's office, and all of the maintenance workers associated. I mean, it's going to be a major simulation that is designed to be a realistic event happening at Simsbury High School. Our teachers will be participating in that as part of their professional development responsibility. And obviously, it's to gain lessons learned from going through something like that in a simulated way, and then the first responders will be doing an after-action report, not only with everybody who participated, but with all the teachers who, the teachers are basically going to be playing the roles of students in the school during this professional development training. So it's a major event with tremendous amount of planning. I want to thank the police chief and Tommy Sheehan and Jeremy Cormier at the school level, certainly Burke and Steve Petrina and all the ambulance folks, Kevin Kowalski, who's leading this. It's been a tremendous effort, and we're looking forward to a strong opportunity to learn tomorrow, quite frankly.
So Katie, I was in the high school today when Mr. Petrina had made an announcement. Did you hear that announcement, and was there reaction from students from where you were?
People were a little confused as to why they weren't allowed to be at school. the announcement, I don't think made it clear how, like, the scale of the event that's gonna happen. I think, Mr. Curtis sent out an email to the parents, and I don't think that got to every single student, but the classroom that I was in, the teacher explained it better, so I hope that message got to everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good information.
So we,
Send something home to.
with the superintendent's message through the listserv, got to all parents saying that this is what was happening, and it was necessary to empty the campus from 11:30 to 2:30 tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
Do we maybe I'm just thinking, since it's a half-day professional development, does the Henry James community know? Like, I'm thinking of
all
people
the
going
staff,
by.
all the staff in the school
You
has
don't
been
want everybody
notified.
getting nervous as they drive by.
All parents district-wide got the message, and the police, if the exercise gets played out in such a way that they will say simulated exercise response so that the scanner listeners should understand that it's a simulated exercise, and they will have signs up around the high school saying police training action, so that anybody driving by who sees something will also know that there's a training exercise going on.
It was a long time ago that I signed up, but is Matt's message, is it always, is it one of those ones you have to sign up for, or would a kindergarten parent have it?
If you're signed up at a school.
Only if you sign up, if any school. Okay.
So that's the major event tomorrow, but I also wanted to highlight that we are doing also building-based trainings with the recommendations from Don Chomet and Jeremy Cormier and Todd Cushman coming out to do some new protocols around our lockdown procedures. We don't just do fire drills in this simulation and lockdowns. There's an after-action discussion about every single drill we do, usually in cooperation with the police, about what did you notice, what did we notice, what can we do better next time. I think that's a very important part of what we do. I always credit, when Sue was in this chair, the unification of our language around standard response protocol was a really important step for our district, to have the procedures of lockout, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter in place firmly established as the major things that we would need to do, and that's really helped get us onto a common vocabulary that has stuck. It's really important. And I'll just say it again, because you loved my emergency response guide, and it's gotten really great feedback from the teachers. And then finally, we continue not only through the Sandy Hook Promise, but to look at other opportunities. Sue has formed a great district team looking at the issue of mental health and how we look at students who may need some support. The partnership with the police has been just fabulous, and as Chief Bolter ascended into the leadership, I know that he has asked his patrol during the day to spend more time out at the schools, be present, and that's been a great partnership that we appreciate. We've actually, Superintendent Curtis and Chief Bolter have already entered conversations about potentially adding a third SRO into the district. That may be something that you see in a budget process. As you know, when we have SROs, we share those costs. It's half school district, half police, and that's how that gets budgeted. So the two that we have now have been a wonderful resources, and we're maybe looking to expand that.
Is there, excuse me, Neil, is there a guideline for ratio of students to SROs that is a sort of a standard best practice or not?
I don't have an answer to that. I'll ask the police if there's anything out there in their best practices.
It might be interesting to get that, and if we're within the best practice, that's great, and if we're not, then probably need to do something about it.
I think I would say pretty squarely now that I think most high schools have gone to a school resource officer, but that certainly not uniformly across the country, but most large high schools have a school resource officer. It's a matter of what other districts have done beyond that. I'll make sure I ask the chief that very question. We don't have an answer yet, but we're continuing to think about after-hours support at Simsbury High School. As you know, it's a very busy place. without a lot of supervision, surveillance coverage during after-school hours. Our custodians serve in that role, but they're busy and they're doing things, and so that's really something we have to pay attention to and be thinking about a best answer for that. As we create kind of a double entry system into the school, we're thinking about what may need to happen with the people who are the door buzzers and the greeters into the school. Is that going to require some additional manpower given the system that we're creating? And then I will, just the notion of a district director of safety or security. Districts our size are investing in positions like this. South Windsor, which is exactly our size, has created a district director of security. Glastonbury, slightly larger than us, has had one for a number of years. I enjoy this work, but the leadership of this work, with a lot of help from other people, is happening through your director of personnel, when the people who do this work in other districts are typically retired law enforcement who are, trained and able to deliver trainings. So I have appointments in those other districts to start to talk about what that looked like in a budget process for them, to look at that type of position.
How expensive is that position?
I think they tend to be around $75,000 positions, but
All up?
I got to do my visits before I.
Yeah. Are you thinking you might propose this position in the next year's budget?
It's a possibility, but I want to look. I want to do my visits to these other districts
Do your
first.
homework first, yeah.
So, and then obviously, as you can tell, safety and security tends to be it is a standing item on our administrative council meetings. We talk about this. I'm visiting with the principals all the time, and we welcome community input. Some of our best ideas come from our parents who are in the school. They see something, they say something, and it helps. It really helps us in terms of moving these efforts forward. So, as you can see, there's a tremendous amount going into it. We're excited about what we're going to learn from tomorrow, and we'll be reporting to the board about that event and the aftermath of that. So,
On this whole idea of safety, which is a huge issue and getting huger, I'm thinking back to our strategic planning session of last week, and I don't recall that this subject even came up in our discussions, and I wonder if there is a way to link this issue to any of the goals that we were talking about last
I think it's linked to operations, and I think it's linked to the umbrella of school climate, and in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
But I do think it fits under our goals.
And so you would expect that we are going to memorialize that idea and that concept in our planning document?
Oh, I would expect that would be part of the 5-year plan, absolutely.
For sure.
Okay, good.
Excellent. And Neil, we know that you're just human resources, but you have done an exceptional job in all of these details, and with your little booklet in everyone's room and all of this kind of stuff is really above and beyond. We really appreciate all the work you put into it.
I feel
Enjoy it.
safer.
I feel safer.
I know, I do.
I truly do. I feel like our kids are safer. I really do. Thank you so much. Moving on to our last piece of business, the quarterly budget analysis.
All right, I'm going to bring us home tonight, and I'll be brief. Focusing on the revenues first, as we always do. There's only positive news so far, but it's a limited amount at this time of year. We do know that we have 2 more tuition-paying students from other towns, so that's additional revenue to the town. Our choice attendance grant that was built into our budget, assuming that 4% enrollment target again this year, as Neil reported at one of your recent meetings, it was met. So that was a large thing to know for next year and for this year rather. We did get positive news. Our IDEA grant, the largest federal grant for special ed, is up slightly from last year. But a lot of our other state grants, we don't typically know any final numbers until much later, and that includes excess cost. And then lastly, we all know that after the election, we'll start hearing more about the state budget. So it's been rather quiet, but experience tells us that that won't happen for too much longer. So stay tuned. In terms of our spending, pace of spending and where we're at for the first quarter year over year, you see on page 2 that based on our comments and trends, we're in a very similar pace. We're actually a little bit, about 0.5% slower than last year. At one of the board's recent meetings, you heard a lot about the staff's, the enrollment impacts and where those fell and staffing levels. I really just wanted to focus on the instructional category and insurance and pension. Because of those larger than expected number of kindergartners, we had to hire 3 added staff. And as Neil noted, it was the first time that our K-6 enrollment really was going upward since 2002, 2003.
Burke, for the benefit of the rest of the board, I want to point out that when it was reported that because of that, we had to hire new people, and hiring new people is always a big deal, increases in full-time equivalents. And so I asked Mr. Curtis after the meeting, how did we fund that? Because it wasn't in the budget. Could you explain that for the benefit of the public and for the rest of the board?
Sure, and that's a part of what I try to highlight under this trends section. So really, in the try to summarize that in the last part of that section. Ultimately, each and every year there's a turnover, and all of the new hires that take place. We have an estimate of what salary level that they'll be brought in at. So ultimately, the HR office and business office have looked closely at where we are, and ultimately we did have enough offset in terms of there were positions that were eliminated in this year's budget, and we had expected to be down. We're up very, very slightly in the total number of FTE certified, and we saw that we really did break even, so to speak, in our costs of staffing. So while the number was slightly larger, the overall cost of those new hires equaled things out.
What was the total that we had to come up with for 3 additional teachers?
I don't have the.
Yeah, they.
I'm still not understanding where the money came from.
So we budgeted a certain number of teacher positions that were going to be cut. And then we have this unknown, so at the time of budgeting, we said 6 other teachers will retire, and we earmarked $25,000 per teacher that we'll save. It's a budget placeholder. In fact, far more than 6 other teachers by the end of the summer had turned over. So where we were holding $150,000 as a yielded savings, we yielded much more than that with the turnover, and therefore, as those kindergarten teachers needed to be added, we would say, where do we stand with the overall, not only the FTE, but the overall dollars? And believe it or not, the 3 new hires we're able to fit within the dollars beyond that $150,000 that we saved.
So we funded these new teachers because of an unexpected increase in the unbudgeted increase in the number of retirements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thanks. That's clear.
And we can never project how much other turnover there is, and that plays into that overall amount of hiring, which was a significant amount of hiring this summer.
Right, it's basically if the $100,000 teacher retires at the very top of the scale with benefits.
Sure.
And it's replaced with a $48,000 teacher with benefits. It's a bigger gap than that $25,000 we budget for.
Safety.
But you don't want to say that every single hire is going to be a $48,000 teacher, because that's not the reality of the job market.
Understand, thank you.
And the other area I just wanted to highlight in terms of our insurance and pension area, from a health insurance point of view, we actually decreased by 7 the number of participants in our plans. You see further shifting to the high deductible health plan, and tried to update you on that trend each quarter. So ultimately, that we're seeing that we're very favorable there, and the overall budget looks very positive. That's great.
Great.
So, is there any other questions?
Thank you very much. Anyone have any other questions? Thank you so much. That's an excellent report, and we appreciate that. Moving on, public audience?
Yes.
Please state your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes.
Sure. Tim Prugar, 101 Hedgehog Lane in West Simsbury. I know everyone wants to get home this evening, but the Cubs lost in the wild card, so I have nowhere to be. I just wanted to comment briefly on 2 things. First, I wanted to commend Mr. Sullivan for the thoughtfulness of his presentation 2 board meetings ago regarding the new hires. Going through in detail each individual really gave me confidence that a great deal of thought goes into it. Particularly the reflectiveness on the diversity and inclusion challenges the district has had. I think our achievement gap data shows the impact of hiring on that, and so I think your reflectiveness on that was excellent. Second thing, I know that Connecticut divides districts into DERGs. However, I would like to see a greater degree of both internal and external benchmarking against not only DERG A, but also local private schools and lower DERGs, C and beyond. While we are in DERG B and being benchmarked against our peers, we're also competing for talent with DERG A, where our students are competing for college admissions. They're competing on the athletic fields, and we're also competing for families that are considering locating to different places in Connecticut. So I would like to know contextually where we stand against other DERGs, but also I think we're potentially missing out on some bright spots in other DERGs that are excelling in areas with potentially lower resources or different demographic communities. And I would like to see an increase in the amount that we're benchmarked beyond simply our peers in DERG B. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry about your Cubs.
About the Cubs? I mean, it's been like 34 years of sadness. The Bears on Sunday was a much bigger.
That said, thank you very much for coming to our meetings, and
It
thank you
is
for your
2-1
input.
Red Sox right now.
Some of us have places to go. Our next board meeting is Tuesday, November 13th, and it'll be right here. Anybody want to make a motion?
Absolutely make a motion.
Anyone want to second it?
Absolutely second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you very much.
Those opposed were not.
That's right. Those opposed.
Tara, has anyone ever...